Welcome to the TDCC Community Live webinar.
TDCC stands for the Developing Child Center, located in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, UAE.
Established in 2012. We have been providing personalized support to over 1,000 children. We have 60 dedicated and committed experts, and we work closely with parents and schools to ensure no child is left behind. We think different, we teach different. We empower, not limit children. Labels like autism, dyslexia, and ADHD are not relevant or perceived as disabilities, difficulties, or disorders that limit children's abilities. We believe that brilliance needs difference. The TDCC services are available in English, French, and Arabic. The inclusive educational services nurture and support the developmental and educational needs and help empower each child to reach their full potential. Occupational therapy assists children in performing and achieving important learning and developmental skills they need in life. Psychomotor therapy is a healthcare profession that is based on a holistic view of the person and is involved in the treatment of different disorders. Speech and language therapy assists children who have disorders of speech, language, communication, and swallowing. Psychology provides both educational and clinical services, including counseling and parenting. ABA therapy focuses on improving specific behaviors. It is commonly practiced as a therapeutic intervention for individuals with autism. Specialist learning support. We assist in developing the academic and social development of students who need support in all these areas. And we design and host local and international training and workshops for practitioners, parents, caregivers, and educators. Just like this one today.
TDCC is honored to present to you our speaker Zara Mirza. Zara is an accomplished educator and advocate with a master's degree in inclusion and special education from the University of Birmingham. She is an associate member of the British Dyslexia Association and a member of PATOS UK. With over 20 years of experience, Zara has specialized in supporting children with dyslexia, ADHD, autism, and learning challenges in both the UK and UAE. Her approach is underpinned by advanced certifications in Orton Gillingham, Science of Reading, and other evidence-based educational practices. She serves as the Dyslexia Assessor and Head of Learning Support Services at TDCC. A key figure in neurodiversity advocacy, Zara is a prominent voice advocating for more inclusive representation in autism research and interventions. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Zara Mirza.
What is dyslexia? Let's start with the simplest of things. Now, what is dyslexia? I am using what is called the DSM-5 definition of dyslexia. DSM-5 is the diagnostic manual that is used pretty much globally. So there are two diagnostic manuals. There's the DSM-5 and there's the ICD-10. These are the two that are used across the world to give anyone of any age a diagnosis of anything. So it could be ADHD, it could be dyslexia, it could be pretty much anything. All right, so now what the DSM-5 says is that dyslexia, and this is the key phrase, it's an unexpected reading difficulty. Now, what's important over here is to really focus on that word, unexpected. What this means is that otherwise the child is doing really well. So they're really good at making friends. They are socially and emotionally doing just fine. Verbally, their communication is spot on. So teachers, parents, wider community members who come in contact with the child, everyone is going like, you know what, this child is doing really well. But why is this spike, this dip happening with reading? That's the first thing. It's an unexpected dip happening only with reading. The second diagnostic criteria is that The child has to have had access to quality teaching for at least 6 months. So, very often, when parents say, is my child dyslexic? People like me, the first question we ask is, okay, what school are you going to? All right, good school, check. Has this school provided your child with any extra support, either within the class or just pulling them out of class for like 20 minutes or so, 3 times a week for a period of 6 months? So once those two are checked off, that is when we start asking further questions in that diagnostic checklist of whether this child has or has not got dyslexia. I will talk about this later on in the last half of this presentation. Okay, now you can see on my slide, it says reading is unnatural. We were not, as humans, evolved to read. We have evolved as creatures to eat, to speak, to hear, to look. All of these senses have naturally evolved. However, reading is something that a few thousand years ago was invented. Amongst our forefathers, someone thought, ooh, let's take a symbol that looks like a squiggle, and let's put a sound to that particular symbol. And that's how reading came about. And reading used to be, up until a few thousand years ago, reading used to be pretty much the purview of a very, very, very small, very privileged segment of society. So it is the one skill which, though extremely widespread now, it has to be explicitly taught. So no matter how intelligent you are, no matter how undyslexic you are, if that's even a phrase that we can use, everyone has to be taught explicitly to read. It's not something which is just going to happen. Like, speaking is something that just happens. Pretty much everyone who's verbal just learns to speak. Reading is not something that happens, it has to be taught. Right, that's number one. The second thing is that dyslexia is a dimensional disorder. What that means is, if this is a dimension, someone could be here having just a teeny tiny element of dyslexic traits. It may not be impacting on how they're doing in school or how they're accessing life very much. And someone could be right at the other end of this dimension where dyslexia is presenting as a very, very, very serious barrier to education in school, to life in society. Just it becomes a very significant barrier. So it's a dimensional disorder. The third important thing over here is that dyslexia is very, in like 17 years of having done this, I have never ever seen dyslexia on its own. Dyslexia does not, it does not happen in isolation. Dyslexia has got, in my experience, dyslexia has got two best friends: ADHD and something called development coordination disorder, DCD, dyspraxia. Very often you will see these two happening together. Almost never have I seen someone with only dyslexia. Dyslexia is it's a very comorbid situation, occurrence. There's a lot of co-occurring factors, which makes being dyslexic quite a challenging thing for an individual. Right, now this one is a very interesting thing, the last one. 1 in 5, 20% of all people have some element of dyslexic traits. It is the single most common condition, neurodiverse condition there is in humanity. Having said which, only 4% of dyslexic individuals in developed countries will ever receive a dyslexia diagnosis, because our barriers to giving people fair diagnoses and then giving people access to fair accommodations are still really, really high something that, as a parent, an advocate, a person who has been working in this field, this is something that really irks me, and this is the one area where we need to do better as a community. We need to lower those barriers to accessing accommodations. Accommodations should not be gate kept behind extremely expensive identification processes. Okay, moving on. So, very quickly, if you follow me on Instagram, you will have seen these on there. Dyslexic learning traits. As early as their first exposure to the written word, dyslexic children start showing dyslexic learning traits. Now, before I delve into this, as early as kindergarten, we also know which children are at risk. Dyslexia is highly, highly genetic. So, if you have a father, a mother, an uncle, a grandparent, a cousin, a sibling who is dyslexic, your genetic dice is loaded. It does not mean that you are going to be genetic. It doesn't mean that you're going to be dyslexic. It just means that you're likelier to be somewhere on that dimension of dyslexic learning traits. The second thing is children who at a younger age, now I'm talking about preschool, nursery years, pre-K years. If children have got a language impairment, a speech impairment, once again, that dice is loaded. Because more than a learning disorder, dyslexia is a language disorder. Talking about that more in a minute. If a child has got articulation issues, or if a child has got difficulty correctly producing the sound of speech, they are likelier to be as a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old, they're likelier to start displaying dyslexic learning traits. Now, why is dyslexia a language disorder? It's something to do with what's called a phonological loop. So, I'm going to grab a letter, just one letter. Right. This is the letter B. Okay. So, it's just a shape, and we know that this is the letter B. What we have done is that we have assigned a sound to this letter. We look at this shape and we say B. In contrast, we look at this shape and we say K. So this is creating a phonological loop, looking at a shape, a letter, and attaching a sound to it, and then blending those sounds together. Cat, cat, and so on. So this is how the loop works when we are reading. When we are spelling, the loop reverses. You say a word, you say cat. And then you go like, okay, now I need to segment this. I need to break this apart. And you make the sound, you make that symbol that says k, and so on. So what happens in dyslexia, and this is one of my favorite analogies, is that you see a wall. You see the entire word, you see cat. You don't see the bricks that make up that wall. Very simply, in 80% of the cases, 70 to 80%, 2/3 of the cases, this is what dyslexia is. An inability or a difficulty to see the bricks that make up the wall. So what are the bricks? The bricks are cat. What's the wall? Cat. Phonological processing, phonemic awareness. That is the first sign in the early years that a child is showing dyslexic type traits. They might struggle to do this. What's this sound? Despite good teaching. First of all, good teaching has to happen. If good teaching is not happening, then it's not the child's fault. So, this, and look, none of this is the child's fault anyway. If good teaching is not happening, there's nothing going on with the child. It's the teaching that's problematic. The child is looking at this, the letter B, and is not able to tell you, even despite being instructed over a period of time in a quality manner, that this says B. They're not acquiring what's called the alphabetic principle. Phonemic awareness. Phonemic awareness is what I've just talked about. Wall, bricks. Okay. Sound isolation. What's the first sound in the word map? Is the child able to tell you What's the last sound in the word map? Are they able to tell you it's p? Those are early traits. What I mean by patchy reading is that they might read the word cat just fine in the first sentence and then read it as pig in the second sentence. So that's patchy reading. What happens when they're slightly older, when they go into year one, is that they might still be overtly sounding out words rather than reading them fluently. So they might be going like b, ob, bob. So when we expect fluent reading, it's not happening. The child is still overtly sounding out. One of the very big things that dyslexic children do in year one is inserting or omitting sounds. So you might be showing them, or they might be looking at a word like this. They might be, oh, back. All right. But they might be reading this as black. They might be inserting a sound in there. Equally, they might be looking at the word black and they might be reading it as back. Or they might be reading it as back. So changing sounds, inserting sounds, omitting sounds happening in year one. Right. Schools are sending spelling lists, and those spelling lists change every single week. So they might be getting 7 out of 10 week 1. Week 3, when they're tested on those same words again, poof, it's gone. Nothing's there. So they're not consolidating those spelling lists. Another thing that happens, and this is completely a personal opinion, I think that dyslexia has, out of everything in DSM-5, dyslexia probably has the biggest impact on self-esteem. So while we are working on sounds, on phonics and spelling and reading, equally important for families, for people like us, for schools, is to constantly bolster self-esteem and self-confidence. Because 20% of the population, 1 out of 5 people, struggle to read. And I have spoken now to so many people who have dyslexic type traits. It's so hard. And just someone telling them that I acknowledge that this is hard. And I acknowledge that you are trying harder than the 18 other kids in your classroom to do what you're doing. And I see your effort. That is really important for us as adults to do. Because for some of the little people, even for some of the older people, this can be quite a significant barrier, and the knock that it takes on confidence, on self-view, can be quite a big one. Right, in year 2 and beyond, so when children are 7 or 8, that is when dyslexic traits explode. Nothing happens to the child. The child is the same. It's just that across curricula, whether you're IB, your UK national curriculum, your US, the curriculum demands go from here to here. Poof. There's a big increase in demand. And dyslexic children, this is when they really start to really falter. So, labored and slow reading. And what I have noticed is more the reading behavior. There's avoidance. There's very significant anxiety. And I want to propose this, that anxiety can look very different in different children. For some children, anxiety can be taking this and throwing this across the room. That's the kind of anxiety we say, oh, behaviors, naughty, disobedient. It's anxiety. It's a lot of like, I'm scared right now. It's fear. So that's explosive anxiety. Then there's the imploding anxiety. And the imploding anxiety is when they become quieter and quieter and smaller and go inside themselves. And both of those need to be acknowledged and they need to be supported. And this is where counseling for everyone, including counseling support for parents, come in. Understanding that this child needs support beyond just B says, B says, B and C says, K. Children might be skipping over. When they're reading a sentence, they might be skipping over words. They might be skipping over entire parts of a sentence. They might be looking at the first sound and guessing the rest of the word. I've written down transposing words over here. So transposing words is that if they're spelling the word the, it might happen like this. So this happens, I've seen this a lot. So if they're reading was, it may become saw. Entire parts of words, they might go like this. That's transposing. And showing very little awareness of the long vowel patterns. So if you have, for example, this, AI says a child sounding this out and actually saying I. So not having very good understanding of what diphthongs and long vowel patterns look like. So that's what you might expect to see in year 2 and in year 3. This might be, and I apologize for this, but it's important for me to make you aware of this. This might be worrying particularly for parents of dyslexic children. This data is from the biggest longitudinal survey, which is still ongoing. It started in the 1980s. It is now 40 years of data collection that has been done on the largest group of dyslexic individuals in the United States. So what this shows is this is where reading starts for typically developing non-dyslexic children when they enter grade 1. And this is how reading, let's see if I can get my spotlight. Brilliant. And this is how it progresses as they move through their school years from grade 1 through to grade 9. And this is what happens for dyslexic readers. Now, caveat, dyslexic readers who have never been given specific support for their dyslexic type learning difficulties. They never catch up to their non-dyslexic peers. Now, the data looks very different for children who have been given evidence-based programs for their dyslexic traits. If they are given interventions really early, tend to catch up. The later you intervene, the smaller this particular, the smaller this gap is. So this is called the Matthew effect. And the Matthew effect is one of the biggest reasons why we always really advocate for early identification and for early intervention. Because the earlier you intervene with a child, if you can catch them here and you can give them intensive, short intervention here, then this gap, you're likelier to catch up to typically developing peers. The later you catch them, the longer it takes to bring them closer to this orange line. Right. I'm going to move on and show you what lies behind reading. So I've already said that reading is unnatural. But what lies behind? Like we see, if you're a good reader, it happens, right? You might observe a good reader in your classroom, or you might observe a good reader somewhere, a child reading. So think of this rope nicely bound together as good reading. But what lies underneath that is so much more complex. And this is why I've said that reading is rocket science. Now, this is Scarborough's rope. This is an excellent model that explains reading. Here we have language comprehension. Language comprehension has got everything to do with how we understand and comprehend language. So, background knowledge. If someone tells me to start reading about, I don't know, sailing regattas, I would hate that. Not my thing. I don't want to read about it. I would be completely uninterested. I have no background knowledge there. But if someone tells me to start reading about dyslexic research, brilliant, my cup of tea. I would have lots of background knowledge. So think about the child that you're reading with. If it's a subject that interests them, they would be immediately hooked. They would have a lot of background knowledge. They might even have vocabulary knowledge. And these things, three things over here, have to do with the comprehension exercises that we do with children. So exploring the structure of language. Verbal reasoning could be what happens next. Why has this person said this? Why has Lucy today decided to bake a cake? And why did she not bake it yesterday? So the answer could be it's Lucy's mom's birthday today and she wants to surprise her. So those are the verbal reasoning, engagement with text kind of questions that you might ask a child while you're reading with them. Okay, now this area. Let me see. I am going to put a box. This area, word recognition. This is the area where dyslexic children struggle. Almost 2/3 of dyslexia lies here. It lies in phonological awareness. 70 to 80% of the children who will be given a diagnosis of dyslexia are going to have something called a phonological processing disorder. Now, once again, the simplest way to explain what a phonological processing disorder is, you see the wall and you don't see the word. Sorry, you see the wall, you don't see the bricks. I'm going to take you through a very brief, quick exercise on phonological processing. Phonological awareness is an umbrella term. There are a number of things that come underneath that umbrella term. The simplest one, the one that we start with, that when children are really young, is taking compound words and putting them together to make a single word. So I will say, put together cupcake, cupcake, rainbow, rainbow. So that's one. You're blending together chunks or syllables to make big words. They've got that? Good on them. Then you take smaller chunks. Now let's take my name. Zara. Blend together, Zara. Okay, let's take someone else's name. Mylene, we should borrow your name. Mylene. Mylene. Who else is there? Jester. Jester. All right. Now, guys, where's the chat? I can't see the chat. Maybe we'll have to stop the share. Would anyone be feeling brave enough to... Oh yeah, there's the chat. Right. Anyone feel brave enough to put this in the chat? I am going to give you names and I want you to split them into their syllables. All right. Whose name are we going to borrow? Donna. Donna. So who wants to split Donna? Well done, Bushra. Donna. Excellent. Samira, let's take your name. Samira, let's do the syllables. 2 or 3. Simple. Well done. Samira. 3 syllables. All right. Let's do animals. Panda. 2 or 3. Good job. So everyone gets the idea of how we break things down into syllables. So syllabification is one area of phonemic awareness. Remember, we've got an umbrella, right? Number 2, again, we're talking about really young children over here. We are going to do rhyming. And have you ever wondered why we sing nursery rhymes to children? Everything is rhyming. I mean, Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. Wall rhymes with fall. Take any rhyme. Like my kids are teenagers. I don't remember nursery rhymes now. So take any nursery rhyme. Baby Shark. Don't start singing it, people. I hate it. Take any nursery rhyme, and you're going to find that. You're going to find rhymes. Take books meant for children. Julia Donaldson, Eric Carle, Brown Bear, what do you see? I see a teacher looking at me. All of these are in rhyme. One of the biggest indicators of good reading ability is for a child to pick up on rhyme, and we really work on that in the early years. So if you have got teeny tiny toddlers, read to them books and sing with them things that rhyme. The awareness of rhyme is so important in the early years. Rather than teaching them that A says a, sing with them that Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall and then he had a big fall. To fall and wall rhyme. Fall, wall, tall. Getting them to tell you a third word that rhymes would be a lot more beneficial than getting them to say B says ba and C says ka. Okay, brilliant. Am I still connected? Right.
Yes, you are, Sarah.
All right. Brilliant, Mylene. I think I might need a little bit of help here from someone because the chat screen has frozen on my screen.
Okay, hold on.
I'm gonna continue. So that's phonological awareness. We've done syllables, we've done rhymes. Now we move on. The second stage of phonological awareness is something which is called phonemic awareness. Just rescue. I'm stuck. So phonemic awareness is, I've got my friend Jester here. All right. So Jester. We're going to borrow half of Jester's name, which is jest. Tell me the sounds in jest. J, e, s. Now that's 4 sounds. When a child is really young, I might start with 2 sounds. I would say, what are the sounds in the word am, That's called segmenting. That's pulling apart the word. That is the first step in getting a child to read and spell. Okay? The second thing is blending. When we do blending, yeah, we can just close this. When we do blending, I might say, okay, thanks, Jessica. I might say, all right, blend together and if a child is struggling, I'll do it like this. And so you see, I'm asking them, in this case, I'm asking them to hold 3 pieces of phonological information. Let's take another word. App. Those are 3 pieces. They will say map. If they struggle, I'll put these 2 together. map, map. And as they go on, we increase the number of sounds we give them. So let's borrow Jester's name again. Jest. So this is all being done without letters. I'm not mapping these onto letters. I'm doing these as oral exercises. And when children come to me and they're at a pre-reading, there could be any age. But parents come to me and they say, he's or she of your age, but they're not blending yet. We spend a lot of time working on phonological awareness. Because first comes phonological awareness, then comes decoding, which is blending sounds to read and pulling apart sounds to spell. And the third thing that makes up good reading are those icky, sticky sight words. Words like the, was, said, reading them on sight. That's why they're called sight words. These are the high frequency words. This is what makes up this rope. It's not just the decoding, it is the decoding, the fluent reading, plus the comprehension. And what happens very often with dyslexic, older dyslexic learners is that so much effort is going into this part, the decoding, that this part has gone out the window. There is nothing left. Every single iota of cognition, of effort, of themselves has gone into just understanding what that word is in the reading. They've got no idea what they're actually reading. It's pointless. It really take them down a level so that they actually understand what they're reading. Okay? Right. I've already talked about this. Early intervention is the key. However, I really want to put a positive spin on this. We are living in very, very different times now. I grew up and went to school in the 80s and the 90s. I am a neurodiverse individual. I really struggled in school. Like, really. Because no one understood or recognized or helped. I was just told that, you know what? You're a failure. And if there's anyone in this webinar who is sort of around my age, what I'm saying is going to resonate with you, because if you did not hear those words in your personal context, you heard those words being said to a peer. But my neurodiverse children today are wonderfully supported and included in school because it's their legal right. There is no better time to be neurodiverse, because right now your dyslexic children, if you have dyslexic children, are being taught by dyslexic adults in school. What we were constantly told, oh, screen time is awful, screen time is bad, iPads are making your kids autistic and dyslexic, and iPads are giving children. I actually saw this, not naming names, but someone saying that the increase in the amount of time children spend on iPad actually causes ADHD. So we have demonized screen time. And I really want you to think about this. Think about this independently without some expert telling you this. If a child cannot read, they're not reading encyclopedias, where are they going to get their information? They're going to get their information from YouTube. They're going to get their information from listening to podcasts. How are they going to, or they're going to get their information from listening to audiobooks. How are they going to get that information? They're going to get their information from here. The second thing that I want you to think about is that when was the last time you took a pen and you put it to paper And if I am to give you spellings right now, that has words like consciousness, millennial, generation, rendezvous. How will you score? I am a teacher of the English language. I can guarantee you that I will not be scoring very well on that particular test because my laptop does a lot of spell correction for me. So don't demonize technology to the extent that, oh my God, this is going to make my child become autistic or ADHD or whatever. Particularly children who are neurodiverse need to be given access to tech because that tech, as they get older, is going to become a very important tool for them to access learning. They need to learn how to type. So, particularly for older dyslexic individuals, teenagers, young adults who are in secondary, who are getting ready for university, learning how to type through a good touch typing program is an is a really important skill. And also, if you are a dyslexic adult listening in, it would be so wonderful if you could reach out within your community and if you could share your story with young people, with students, with parents of dyslexic children. Because hearing your success, knowing that you have made it, and also hearing about your struggles, it would be so empowering for children. I mean, this is one of the things that I always say that, like, really, if you could share your stories. There's so many dyslexic teachers right now in school. We don't really need to look at Kiera Knightley and Richard Branson to find our dyslexic role models. The dyslexic role models just might be there teaching your kids in their schools. So just from that self-esteem, from that reassurance viewpoint, it'll be really lovely if dyslexic adults could put their hands up and say, yeah, we're here and we made it and it's going to be all right. And that's one thing I can assure you that it will be all right. It's not the end of the world. It genuinely isn't. You're here because you care. You're giving me an hour of your time. You care about your children. So that brings me to this. This is where I want to end. Hopefully on time. This is the ecological systems theory, and this is what takes me back to that very first thing that I shared with you, that only 4% of dyslexic individuals will get a diagnosis. And that's because of this. At the very center of this, we have the child. And the child is born as they are. If a child is born with dyslexia, then they're born with dyslexia. It's who they are. That's them. It's neither good, it's not bad. It's just who they are. I mean, I'm born with dyspraxia and inattentive, like you can hear all of that in the way I move my hands and the way I talk, sparking off everywhere. So my kids were born with their genetic dice loaded the way it is. So there is no great, I don't know how many neurodiverse parents are here or how many parents of neurodiverse children are here, but as a parent, it annoys me whenever someone meets my children. It's very obvious what their diagnoses are, and they say, "Oh my God, life must be so hard for you. This so sorry to see your children are like this." I'm like, you have no idea how life your pity needed. So at the center of this is a child who is who they are. And they're very likely just happy, healthy, thriving little people. Now, around them is their microsystem, and their microsystem is their family. And if you're here and you're listening in, then your child is extremely lucky because they likely have a very supportive family. School, peers, and your religious community, or it doesn't have to be a religious community, it could even be a religious and a social community, are really important factors because they are what is going to form a lifelong support structure around your child and around you as well. And then we have the, the wider government system in which we exist. And over here in Dubai, yes, we have inclusion policies. We have schools who can now not say no to having children based on their diagnosis. But there are also barriers. Those barriers can come in many forms. 4% of children get diagnosed with dyslexia, and the reason why only 4% of children get diagnosed with dyslexia is because diagnostic assessments still have to be privately funded by families. And they're really expensive. I know that because I go through the process every 2 years for my children. Schools can still ask for parents to pay for extra support. Extra support, specialist support, is very, very seldom in a fee paying environment handed out for free. So, this increases the risk factors of, remember that chart that I showed you, the Matthew effect? All of these are increasing the risk factors of this curve not meeting up with this curve. So, where these risk factors are less, so imagine the child doesn't have very many dyslexic traits. Imagine that the child is in a school that provides a lot of support. You come closer. Imagine that the child's, I don't know, auntie is a qualified dyslexia specialist. All right? And then the opposite can also be true. But also, take a look at this. Take a look at this macro system. The dominant stories are now changing. More and more neurodiverse individuals are being employed in workplaces where inclusive ecosystems are being created. And by the time our children go into the workplace, I'm absolutely certain that the idea of the workplace will have changed almost completely. It'll be different from the way we see the workplace right now. So laws are changing, culture, ideology, all of these things, government structures are changing. Why? Because the neurodiversity movement is becoming stronger and stronger. And that's why I happen to have a lot of hope, not just for your children, but for my children. And maybe I have rose-tinted glasses on, but that's the belief that I hold on to. All right, I am going to 5 minutes rush through this. What is evidence-based practice? This is really important, people, particularly these days, and this is going to sound really ironic coming from someone semi-popular on Instagram. Don't listen to people on Instagram. Don't listen to people on Instagram because they might not be telling you and they might not be selling you something that is evidence-based. Mylene is going to email this particular slide with all of its resources to everyone who is registered for this webinar. If you want to find out what is evidence-based, like my child is dyslexic, what do I do next? And someone says, buy this bottle of magic water from me and it will cure dyslexia. That's not going to happen. So how do you know what works? Step number one, either the BDA, which is the British Dyslexia Association, or the IDA, which is the International Dyslexia Association. These are the two. This is the United Kingdom. This is the United States. These are the world's two biggest charity organizations, and they have their own accreditation. So they accredit individuals, they accredit programs. Anything that has the BDA or the IDA check mark, you're good with them. You really are. Others that produce very good resources for parents, Reading Rockets, Lots and lots of podcasts on there. I'm not putting anything on here that is behind a paywall. This is all free to access. BDA has got good parent trainings that are very, very low cost. Um, Florida Center of Reading Research. If you are interested in upskilling yourself, this is where I went. Brilliant, brilliant stuff. If there are any Senko's teachers LSAs on here and you want amazing resources, Texas Reads, this is where you want to go. Right, apps. If your child is in those early stages, is not blending, you will have to pay a subscription, but this app is super good. I endorse it. Nessie, again, and I have just seen on the chat someone is asking, how do I teach my child how to type? A BTA accredited program TTR is touch, type, read, spell. Now, this is an expensive program. It's not free and it's not cheap. The best thing to do is to find out whether you can have a free trial. But again, this is absolutely brilliant. Last thing, go to YouTube, please. UFly, University of Florida Literacy Institute. One of the best Orton Gilligan based programs that has come out in August of 2022 is UFly. A lot of their material is open source. It is available. You can watch their webinars on YouTube. They're absolutely brilliant. And the one webinar that I would recommend if you have the time and you really want to explore what evidence-based practice is, what you are being sold makes sense, is to watch this webinar called Science or Snake Oil, because it will empower you. You will find out how to do your own research to find out that when people like me say all of this stuff, are we actually believable? So the best thing that you can do as a parent of a dyslexic child or as an adult with dyslexia is empower yourself, because in this day and age of masses of information out there, how do we find out what evidence-based is before we invest time and money into it? Three books that I would like to recommend for parents by Louisa Mons. Fantastic author. Overcoming Dyslexia is still the gold standard. It's been in print for about 20 years. If you have a child or if you yourself have been newly diagnosed with dyslexia, this is what you need to read. It comes as an audio book as well, because the book is about, I'm looking at mine right now, it's at least an inch thick, 1,000 pages. And finally, everyone working with dyslexics, parent of a dyslexic or dyslexic themselves, this IDA Dyslexia Handbook is open source. It's free to download off the internet. Please get hold of it, because there is simple stuff on there that would be super helpful. Thank you very much, everyone. If you could just at some point leave us a feedback. Was this useful? What would you like to hear more of, and what would it have been useful to hear less of? That would really, really help me tailor the next training. Okay, really lovely.